Bosal Stitch Steam that of course we carry in our online shop now. I'm just laughing because of course right before we went live I forgot that I needed to wind a bobbin because I used up all my thread, but no worries because that only took me like 30 or 40 seconds. Hey everybody, I hope all of you are doing well. It is a sunny day here in North Central Florida where I am coming to you from my home sewing studio. Let's see, we got some friends tuning in. Let's make sure technology is working good. If y'all can see me and hear me, just put something in the chat real quick. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Hi, Jackie. She says, what are we making today? We are going to be doing a live demo on how to make this fun textured fabric. Super, super fun using a product called Bosal Stitch Steam. And as you're watching the demo, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube today, definitely make sure to give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends on social media. And of course, if you want to grab a pack, the link is in the chat and in the description box below for you. Everything good? Okay, awesome. Hi, Karen, tuning in from Michigan. We got Liz from Michigan, too. Hi, Jean, tuning in from France. Awesome. Janelle from Illinois. Hey, girl. Miss Kathy, tuning in from North Carolina. Hey, Miss Monique, she says, I can hear you loud and clear. Awesome. So let's get started. First, I will mention that the Bosal Stitch Steam, most products nowadays, y'all have probably seen the prices are going up because we still had some in stock. We've kept the price as it was before. So on my next batch of inventory, when I reorder it, the price will probably go up a little bit. So if you do want to save a little bit more, you know, this is the time to grab it. So I showed you already the zippered pouch. Now I do have a full step-by-step video tutorial on how to make this zippered pouch. This is called, like if you just do a Google search or a YouTube search for how to make a textured zippered pouch, my video tutorial will pop up. And when we swap to this angle in a minute, this camera angle in a minute, I'm going to share with you some do's and don'ts. I also have a few more pieces prepped here, but say you don't want to make zippered pouches. Well, here is a little placemat that we made. Some of you who came to my retreat back in 2017 probably still have a set of these that you made while at the retreat. So here I decided to make a placemat that was pretty simple, easy to use up, great kind of like fat quarter busting project. But then you got to make different little textured squares to add that little quilting and patchwork element to this side of it. So let's go ahead and swap over to this camera angle. And the reason I'm bringing up the placemat is just kind of to show you something else that you can make with it. But if you order the Stitch Steam from our online shop, you will get a free PDF download for my, I called them back then, Texturized Placemat pattern. It's a super simple pattern, but I give you all the dimensions and all that on how to make it. Okay, so you can see how fun just adds a little something else instead of just plain fabric. Okay, so this is the product. And when you get the package, it comes in a piece that measures 18 inches, so half a yard, by 62 inches wide. So it's a good big piece, enough to make a lot of these kind of placemats, zip pouches, small bags, that kind of little, you know, cutesy projects, right? So it also includes an instruction sheet here where it tells you that basically this is a shrinkable fabric, all right? That shrinks with steam, that is. Once it shrinks, it ain't going back to the regular size that it was. So here's what the fabric itself looks like. It's 100% polyester. It's nice and thin because it needs to be, right? It will remain in your project after we stitch through it and shrink it down to create that texture. And let me grab this here so y'all can see. Oh, Helen says this is going to be great. She says, I'm switching to premium YouTube now to watch. Well, great, because the videos are streaming for you in high definition. So hopefully we look okay. Okay, so here's the fabric. You can see that it's pretty sheer. And all we're going to do is basically put our cotton fabric on top of it. You can pin it in place to kind of hold things steady because it is kind of slippery, all right? And I'm going to do a full demo for you, but I just want to walk you through so you can see what it's like. So this is 18 inches across, and you can see that I've already used up some of it, but it's a nice long strip that measures 62 inches wide, okay? Oh my goodness, Miss Kay says that she bought the Stitch Steam a long time ago and she still hasn't used it. She says, maybe this will give me the kick in the rear I need to use it. I think so, Kay, definitely. And I'm going to share a tip with you too as we work on some of this stuff. So here's a sample piece of fabric. And this is a chunk of the Stitch Steam. So this is the one that I'm going to stitch through in a minute for you. But you can see that you'll just want to have your fabric cut to the same size as the Stitch Steam. You don't have to, but just know that usually it's going to shrink about 30%. Now it can shrink a little less or a little bit more depending on how close together your stitching lines are. So when I say stitching lines, what am I talking about? A couple tips here. One is you want to use a thread, and it can be cotton or polyester. I've had successful results with both types of thread, but you want to use a thread that either matches the color of the fabric you're using or is slightly darker, okay? And I have a couple samples to show you. So here I have a piece of fabric that I've already stitched through, and I broke it up basically into quadrants. I've stitched on this left top quadrant, this one, and this one has yet to be stitched through because I'm gonna do that live on camera with you. Now you can't see the stitching. That's kind of the idea, okay? Because I matched it with an aqua colored thread. But when I flip it over, here is where you can see the types of stitching that I did, or the type of stitching that I did through the fabric and the stitch and steam, okay? So I wanted to do this to show you a little bit of, variety. Here we have straight stitches that I kind of went back and forth like this at an angle. Here, this is kind of like an overlock, and this is just some decorative stitches that I used on my sewing machine. This is one of those like faux overlock stitches, and so I just did that in a couple little wavy motions, and by wavy, I mean I'm just like stitching down and kind of, maneuvering my fabric a little bit. It doesn't have to be super straight. The more ins and outs you have in the stitching that you choose to use, the more little kind of nooks and crannies you have for that fabric to crinkle up in, okay? And you'll see how that plays out when I crank up my iron and steam it up. And then here I did a zigzag stitch. This is the one that I do not recommend. You don't want stitches that just go back and forth because the space in between the zig and the zag is not enough for the fabric to crinkle up in those spaces, okay? And what do I mean by that? If we have a look at the textured zippered pouch, now remember I have a free step-by-step video tutorial on how to make this zippered pouch already here on my YouTube channel. Just do a search, type in Crafty Gemini, and this is a tip for y'all anytime you want to find one of my tutorials. Just type in Crafty Gemini, and then keywords for whatever you're looking for. So Crafty Gemini, textured zipper pouch, it'll pop right up for you. So this is one panel that I did with the tips that I recommend, right? The do's. I used a darker kind of fuchsia or pink colored thread where you can't even really see the stitches here. On the other panel, you can see that it doesn't look that great. I used a white thread, or I think maybe it was a light pink, but it was lighter than the fabric, so it stands out, right? And then on top of that, I did zigzag stitches, and you can see what I mean, like the stitches pop up, but it doesn't allow the fabric to wrinkle in between the zig and the zagging of the stitches. So big difference, and I think that this is a great example to display what I'm telling you to do, okay? Same color thread or slightly darker, no zigzag stitches. Instead, if you have one of those kind of snaky meandering stitches on your sewing machine, that is a fabulous decorative stitch to use. And if you don't worry, because I'm going to show you how to do it on a regular sewing machine that doesn't have that type of decorative stitch. Okay. Karen is asking a great question. She says, can you wash the stitch and steam? So you'll be very happy to hear that this product, because I said it's permanent and it's going to remain in your fabric, it is machine washable, dryable, and you can even dry clean it, okay? After it's already shrunk down. It won't affect the product or the project any further, okay? Here's a little sample that I whipped up today to show you. This is a light blue fabric, and then I used the same aqua colored, turquoisey thread that I used here. So because the thread is darker than the fabric here, you can also use that kind of as a design element, right? If you don't want the thread to blend into the wrinkly fabric and you kind of wanted to add another layer of texture and pop of color. Y'all know I love a pop of color. This is something that you can do here. But the reason I made this one is to show you. On the back, you can see how the fabric, you can see the difference, right? This is a stitch and steam before it's ironed, and this is the stitch and steam after it was ironed. Okay, so it shrunk down, and what it does is it basically takes the fabric with it for the ride. Okay, that's how you end up with that textured fabric. Now, another thing here, let me grab my ruler real quick. This piece started off measuring 9 inches by 9.5 inches. Okay, so I did just these kind of angular, and this was just a straight stitch. I just was slightly moving the fabric as we went along, okay? So you don't have to know how to do free motion quilting. You don't have to drop the feed dogs. You don't have to change out your foot. This was the regular universal foot, straight stitches, and I was just kind of scooting the fabric back and forth, and I'll show you step by step how I do that in a second. But again, this started off 9 inches by 9.5, and after it's fully shrunk down, it now measures, about 8 by 7. So it's going to shrink. So this is the #1 mistake I find that my students make with this product, is that you forget to anticipate the shrinkage, all right? So let me pop in here, make sure I don't have any other more specific questions that I'm not gonna cover until a little bit. Let's see. Carla is asking, can you use it on felt? So that's a great question. Personally, I have not ever used it on felt, but I would think, because I have used it on different types of fabrics, mostly cotton, but you can use it on slightly thicker fabric. What I would say is, if the felt is not so thick, okay, and you'll have to play with it on a little sample piece, just remember that whatever stitching you do through it, if after you steam it, the stitch and steam is going to take that fabric and shrink it, right? So if you're using a super stiff fabric that's likely not to shrink, you may end up with something super funky. But if it's a drapey type of felt and something that's a little bit more pliable and easy for you to kind of fold, then you may want to try it on a little sample piece and see what you get. It's super cool to see, because based on the weight of the fabric you use and the type of stitching that you do through the 2 layers, it's like you never know what you're going to get until you hit it with the steam iron. So super, super fun. All right. Let's see. Marissa says, can you add heat and bond to the back of it and use it for applique in embroidery? Absolutely. So the way that you want to treat the fabric is, take your bigger piece, stitch through it, you know, make it as tight, as wrinkly as you want, and then take this piece and cut it down to your size. So from this step, then I would add like the heat and bond or the stitch and steam or whatever, and then make, you know, cut it out in the shape that you want for your embroidery. Or if you're talking like machine embroidery for in the hoop projects, this would be super cool, right? Because you start off with a bigger chunk anyways, and then you can have the machine stitch around it, and then you go in and trim after. Super, that's a great idea for like textured little designs. How fun would that be? Okay. All right, let's see. Marilyn says, my 2 packages are a few years old. Will they still be good? Absolutely. You're perfectly fine. Take them out, definitely, and put them to good use. Okay, so let's start. Let's go ahead and stitch in this corner here with what I recommend you start with. If you just have a straight stitch machine, you can do this too, okay? Remember, the product that we're talking about is Bosal Stitch and Steam. We sell these in half yard cuts by 62 inches wide, and we have the links for you in the chat box right now if you're catching us live, or in the YouTube description box as well, okay? So I'm going to stitch from this side, and you could technically stitch from this side too. Just make sure that, you know, whatever thread you have in the bobbin is the one that you want to show up on the pretty side. Either way. So actually, I am going to do it this way so that you all at home can see what I'm doing a little bit more. Let me scoot over. Okay, so I'm just going to start here in the center, kind of at the diagonal, and I'm just going to put my machine on a straight stitch. For the length, I'm going to do like 2.4 stitches. You don't have to go super duper short because you're going to be there for a long time, right? And the reason we are stitching through it is twofold. One, to hold the 2 layers together so that the stitch and steam can take that fabric for a ride once we steam it. And 2 is to create the nooks and crannies that we want. There's no need to go super, super short. You're just going to be adding more bulk and adding more time to your project and how, you know, how long it's going to take you to finish it. So I would say about a 2.4 to 3.0 millimeter stitch length. Okay, so we're just going straight. So if you want to just do straight diagonals, in between the diagonal lines is where the fabric is going to shrink, right? Because that's the part that hasn't been stitched down. So think about it like that. So if you want some shape to the texture of your finished fabric, you need to create those nooks and crannies and in and out points with your stitching. So as I'm stitching straight, I'm just kind of moving the fabric. Now, this is a super fun and uber creative project because for those of you that are maybe super perfectionists, like me, and feel some kind of way about maybe getting puckers or pleats in your fabric, this is the perfect project for that, okay? Because it doesn't really matter. It's going to be underneath, and it's just going to create more texture when you steam it. So see what I ended up doing there? Just a wiggly line. Now, when you go to do the next one, and this has to do with the spacing in between your lines, my recommendation, after having done this for years, is to keep the spacing in between your stitch lines about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. That's it. A little bit tighter than that, you can get away with it, but like if you're stitching 1/4 of an inch apart or 1/8 of an inch apart, there's not going to be enough room in between the stitches to allow that fabric to shrink up. Does that make sense? So you won't really get that fun texture that you're aiming for. So you got to give it room to breathe, basically, so the fabric can wrinkle up for you. All right. Hi, Margarita. She says, a new hobby. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, Lynn says, I used it 10 years ago. I might have a piece left over. Take it out. And this is another thing, because it is a lightweight and it's 100% polyester sheer-ish fabric, be careful that you don't mistake it for like a polyester lining if you're someone who makes clothes, because you're going to be devastated if you try to use this in your lining of a garment thinking that it's a lightweight lining. And then you find out it was actually Stitch and Steam. So label your stuff and keep the paperwork in with your package, okay? So you know what it is, because that's what it looks like a really thin polyester lining. All right, so now, again, same thing. And I'm just moving the fabric slowly. Do not yank. You will break your needle. So just kind of as the fabric is pulling through and the feed dogs are still up, I'm just sewing. It's just that instead of keeping things straight and steady, I'm moving it. But the machine is still stitching as it normally would, okay? So I'm trying to keep the spacing between the last line of stitching and this new one to that, like I said, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch you can get away with, you know. But if you have like, so something like this, if I had this big chunk, it's just going to shrink up like into one big puddle of fabric, because there's not the stitching in there to give it those breaking points that create that fun texture, okay? So for sure, if you've never used it before, you'll have to play a little bit around it, but I'm trying to show y'all, you know, some different samples. And as you look at the other stitches that I use in these other quadrants, when you see it steam up and I show you the finished result, I think that will also help you kind of anticipate what you're going to get depending on what you end up doing, right? Without you having to waste the whole package just to experiment. Even though that's fun too, and then you can always just cut down your fabric and use it for a project. Now, I will share with you one of my favorite tips for using this product, and that is for using up that ugly fabric in our stash, right? Sometimes I feel like we all go through phases, right? Fabric that I loved 15 years ago that I just could not wait to buy 3 yards of. I don't know why. You pull it out of your stash today and you're like, what was I thinking when I bought this fabric? Am I the only one? If that's happened to you, please let me know that in the chat box below. But you can take out those fabrics that you're no longer in love with, especially if they kind of have like muddy colors or just like a weird texture, and you kind of look at it and are like, what am I going to use that with or for? You can always put the Stitch and Steam behind it, and it literally will breathe new life into that fabric. I've done that plenty of times, and you end up with something totally different. You end up going from like fabric to like, whoa, this fabric worked out beautifully for this, okay? Thank you, Maria. She says, click the thumbs up and help Vanessa out. I definitely appreciate that. If you have crafty friends who are kind of like, I haven't sewn in a while, or I haven't quilted in a while, I feel like these fun types of products like this really help you get your sojo back. Because you can just start off, take 1 fat quarter, you know, a little chunk, scraps, make something fun with it, texturize that fabric, and then you make a little pouch. And you're like, oh, now I remember why I used to love sewing so much. That happens to me sometimes, believe it or not. We always need something, you know, a little something here and there to help us bring it back. All right, so Susan says, is there a right or a wrong side? Great question. No. If any part of this product, this Stitch and Steam product, gets steam added to it, it's over. It's getting steamed, right? It's going to crinkle, it's going to wrinkle, and give you that amazing texture for your projects. All right, so I'm still working my way down. So this is the part that just takes a little bit, but it's totally worth it, because once you crank up your steam iron, it just, oh, the magic before your eyes is just like, whoa, that was fun. So if you're teaching somebody how to sew, or you want to work on a zippered pouch, or a kid that like loses their attention really fast, I used to do this a lot when I taught kids sewing classes, was just like, okay, stop the fussing and fighting, go steam your fabric. And they're all like oohing and awing when they see the fabric shrink before their eyes. So it kind of keeps them engaged, involved, and you get a really cool tactile, you know, textured fabric when you finish making your little pencil pouch or snap pouch or whatever it is. So great for beginners too. And for gifts, those of you, I know a bunch of you are already busy, you know, working on your gift making stuff. If you kind of feel like, oh, I've been making the same thing over and over again, use the Stitch and Steam on one of them. and make your own fun fabric. So y'all see what I'm doing, just back and forth and wiggle here and a wiggle there. And I have a couple more lines to go, and then we're gonna whip out the iron. Now, I say steam iron because this is one, you know, oftentimes I will mention in my projects, like if I need to steam something or I want to set some seams, I will say I spritz it with water from a separate spray bottle and then hit it with the heat of a dry iron. That ain't gonna work here. Because this fabric, you do not want to hit this with the iron, okay? So you'll see when I do it. I already put some water in my iron, made sure that it's not sputtering black stuff on me and all kind of calcified stuff, because we do have well water here and it's quite hard water. So you'll see how that works, and you're basically just going to hover it over, and oh my word, the magic. Okay. Oh, cool. Lynn says when she bought the Stitch and Steam, she said that it was for a cool textured flap on a purse pattern. So that's another great tip and something to share. You don't have to make the whole project out of the Stitch and Steam, right? If you're getting one pack and you want to use it here and there to add a little something else, you know, how sometimes you were like, it's kind of plain, right? You have a plain project and you just want to add a little something, right? Without adding bling or hardware or something like that that's metal or shiny. Add a little texture. It serves the same purpose, and you only need to use it for a little chunk, right? So like she mentioned, the purse flap or the back of something, or just like a side pocket. I mean, there's so many ways that you can use this, right? Okay, so sewing machine out the way. Martelli pressing mat back in the shop. Get this ruler out. Let me heat up my iron right quick. Take a sip of water while that steam, or while the water heats up a little bit so we can hit it with the steam. Amanda says, I'm glad you said that because I always use a spray bottle. Me too, girl. But this ain't it. This is the fun part. So, all right, it's heating up. I'm gonna wait till it gets good and steamy. And then we are going to steam it from the cotton side, okay? Just to make sure that you don't, mistakenly hit the Stitch and Steam with the iron. It's going to take, like I mentioned, and I think that's the way that the easiest way I think for me to explain it is that wherever the fabric is stitched to the Stitch and Steam, the Stitch and Steam, after we steam it, is going to take the fabric for a ride. So the stitches are basically anchoring down the Stitch and Steam where it won't be able to wrinkle. And then any areas that are not, yeah, they can see that. Any areas that are not stitched are where the fabric is going to pucker, okay? So I'm curious to see what happens in each of these. And unfortunately, I will not be able to just like steam one quadrant, because that steam will travel and you're just gonna see the whole thing. So we'll flip it over and analyze which was what stitch quadrant so that we can see what happens. But again, make sure that you account for the shrinkage. This always happens. You'll think, oh, it's a 7-inch zippered pouch. Let me just cut out a little 8-inch piece. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's going to be too little, okay? Here we go. Yes, So Diva 5691 says it's great for pockets. Okay. Oh, Sunella says, I guess you don't cross the stitches, so you can. And I'll actually bring you back to this sample. If you notice, because this is quite bright, you can see, I don't know if you can see, but I have straight stitches that I did along the diagonal first, this way, just with the straight stitches. And then I went in kind of perpendicular to that and went in with the zigzag stitches. So if you did do straight stitches this way, kind of like a cross hatching, say you did diagonal lines with straight stitches and then went in the opposite direction, think about what will happen. In the diamond areas that you've created by those crossing lines or intersecting lines, that's the area that's going to puff up. So it's really going to be like little pillow puffs instead of full texture. So again, fun ways to play around and experiment, right? Because on this one, you can see in between these lines, the fabric just wrinkles in every which direction. So that's kind of the look that I like. So here we go. Webba says, I have to try this. Absolutely. And if you are interested in trying out this product, remember it's called Bosal Stitch and Steam, and we sell it in our online shop. We didn't have that many to go around, so if you snag one, you got lucky. And if you are watching this and are headed over there to order one after it's already sold out, we set it to back order because I already placed another large order. I know we're going to go through that stuff for the holidays. I know it's super fun to use. Okay, so here we go. If you blink, you're going to miss it. Hold on, let me get rid of these tails. I'm so dramatic with the big reveals. It's like, ta-da, watch. Get rid of all these tails. Here we go. I'm telling you, don't blink. Ready? How fun! Okay, so let's stop real quick and focus on something that I'm noticing in this one. Because the design on the fabric is wiggly too, and it features two different colors, it's even adding almost like a secondary level of visual interest, right? It makes it look now almost like little bubbles. Isn't that fun? Look. Let's go. Let's keep going. And you're going to want to continue to steam this until it does. Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed. This is so cute. You're going to want to continue to do this until the fabric no longer shrinks. So get all the shrinkage out. Isn't that fun? Okay, so look at that. So for those of you that maybe you're going to get a pack of this and it's going to be your first time trying it out, I think at first glance you can see that even if you're doing the same thing I did, splitting it in quadrants and kind of experimenting with different stitches, overall you're still going to get that textured vibe, okay? But I can, just from looking at it here, this is bigger chunks because, see, I had that big space right there. So it's kind of like a looser one. It's not as densely wrinkled as I like, okay? So let me keep doing this to make sure I get all the shrinkage out of it. And you can see how much smaller it is now. And then you would just, you know, let it cool and then cut it down to size for whatever project you're planning to make with it, right? So account for the shrinkage first. Okay. Yes, Tamara says, I remember how fast this worked on the fabric for the pouch I made. I mean, it's instant. Okay. Oh my, oh, so fun. Okay, and then remember also that when we're talking about the type of fabric to use, this fabric that I used here is 100% cotton, but it is a cotton voile. So it's just a lighter weight, typically used in dressmaking, but you can make some really nice lightweight quilts out of it. And it just took everything in. So if we look, I think, and I'm going to try to zoom in a little here. Okay, so, okay, iron, done with the steam. So here is kind of the more loosey-goosey area, okay, because that had the most space right there. On this quadrant where we did the straight stitches, the one that I just did in those kind of wiggly lines, you get a really cool distribution of those wrinkles right here. I can see that the biggest puffy part right here is here. And if we flip it over, we see that it corresponds to the widest area. And this is big. This is about, well, 3/4 of an inch or so probably it was. It probably was a little bit bigger and then it kind of came down. But you can see that if you leave your spacing like that, you'll get some looser wrinkles, okay? In these areas right here, oh, this feels amazing, like super cool little wiggly texture down here. And you can see that these were the ones where we're about 3/8 of an inch apart, okay? So think about that when you go to do your own stitching through the layers. And then what else? Let's look at this other quadrant. So this is the one that had that faux overlock stitch where it like stitches 3 or 4 stitches straight and then it jumps and does like a zigzag and then it goes straight again and then a zigzag. So here you see that we have these gaps, but although this is further out, you can see what happens. You're still going to get the fabric that wrinkles, but it's a looser wrinkle, just like we showed in this other section here with the zigzag. So the bigger spacing you leave, the looser the wrinkle. So think about that when you're designing, you're basically designing your own fabric. What types of wrinkles do you want? And then, you know, stitch accordingly. Okay, then where's the other one? So we did that one that I had just done. Oh, this one. So this is a straight stitch that I did kind of going back and forth along the diagonals. And I would say this one is probably the most even in terms of the texture that it created, because if we have a look and see, it's pretty even in the spacing too. On one end it'll be narrower, then it opens up before I swing back around. At the end it's wider, swing back this way, it's narrower. So it alternates between a wider section and a point of a triangle, wider section and a point of a triangle. So if you go like that back and forth with your straight stitches on the diagonals, you'll get a nice overall wrinkly texture. I love this. This is so much fun. And again, the key thing here is to use that thread that is either the same color or slightly darker. And then you can also imagine that the fabric you choose to use is going to add a whole nother level of texture and visual interest to the project, right? So this is a big difference from this. Yes, we can still see the wrinkles, we can feel the texture, but because the thread is dark and the fabric is a solid and lighter, it's a whole different vibe, right? And the same thing for the zippered pouch. Here we had the texture that I created with those wiggly back and forth meandering stitches with this thread that was slightly darker, like another pink, so you can't see it. But stay away from those zigzag stitches, okay? Because the zigzag stitches, because the fabric underneath the zigzag stitches shrink, you end up with these loose stitches, and it's not a good look, okay? And then on top of that, it doesn't look that great because I used a lighter thread too, okay? So stick to thread that matches or is slightly darker, and play around with the different design, elements or the design idea. Instead of just going on a diagonal two, you can go in a corkscrew kind of swirl shape. That would look amazing. Imagine how the wrinkly texture would go around following the spacing in between the stitches. So much that you can do. Nancy's asking a great question. She says, if you steam it longer, will you get more wrinkles? You won't. There's only a certain amount of shrinkage in the fabric. That's why I say make sure you steam it until you see that it no longer shrinks, and then boom, that's it. Another thing to note, this is permanent. This is a new fabric that you have created. There's no way to oh, I don't like it, let me go back. There's no going back. That fabric is shrunk, okay? And it's staying just like that. All right. Oh, Mary Grace says this is crazy cool. I think so too. And I think if you are looking for a little something to boost your sojo, your sewing mojo, your motivation to get into, the holiday sewing gifts that you're probably going to be working on this year, this is an awesome product to use. Okay. Oh, So Diva says, would it work for making hair scrunchies? That would be crazy cool because you're going to then be adding another level of texture and wrinkly to the fabric to then make the scrunchie. Oh my gosh. I need to do that. I'm gonna try that. That sounds amazing. Super, super fun. Just know that because it is wrinkled in the fabric that you're gonna use, you would want to use elastic. So I do have a hair scrunchie tutorial. Again, just do a quick YouTube search for Crafty Gemini, hair scrunchie. It'll pop right up for you. So you would, because there's some scrunchie projects that you can make without elastic because the fabric you use stretches, right? In this case, this fabric is not going to stretch. So make sure that you use a hair scrunchie making technique that uses elastic for sure. Gracie's asking how big are these sheets and can we use cut up pieces from the sheet for a big area that we're using for a pouch? So first question is how big are the sheets? The packages that we sell measure 18 inches, so half a yard by 62 inches long, so quite big. This is the one that I've been working from, so I'll just show you what the width is. This is the width, and let me zoom out. There. So 18 inches and then by a long strip of 62 inches, okay? So you basically get half a yard by more than 1.5 yards in length. That's more than that. Crystal says she can't find it in the store. We'll put it in the chat for you. If you are, Crystal, I see you're watching on YouTube, so you can find it in the YouTube video description box right below the video as well. And if you ever are looking for something in our online shop, by the way, you can always shop with us. We have hundreds of digital and physical products in our shop. The website is craftygemini.com/shop. That's it. If you're ever looking for a specific product, you can type in on the top right-hand corner of of the website, just type in the product you're looking for. So for this, you type in stitch and steam or stitch or steam, either one of those keywords, and it'll pop right up for you. So that's one way that you can search there too. But it's under tools and notions, under that submenu as well. Okay, let's see what else. Garnet says it would be cool to do that to one of the bags in the next bag club that's coming out soon. Yes, Garnet, you're super smart. That would be super fun to use in that. And yes, for those of you that are waiting for my next bag club, it's in the works. Almost done. Almost done. It's coming super soon. Okay, Julie's asking, when you sew with it and press your seams, will it keep its shape? So let's do it. Let's chop this up right quick. I mean, and I can show you on here too. You can see these are two different panels for sure, but it does. It'll keep its shape because where it's wrinkled, you're stitching it down for whatever those connecting seams are. And then I'll show you here on this one. So on this, oh, and I did mention it. I thought I forgot to mention. When you order the Stitch and Steam from our shop now, we are including a free PDF download for this texturized placemat pattern. So it's a super simple pattern, but I give you the math, the directions and stuff on how to make these so you can make them for the holidays or, just to add a little something else to your table decor. Okay, so what I was gonna say here is on this one, I used white thread. Yeah, you can see it. I used white thread and I just did straight up and down, just straight vertical lines of straight stitches. And you can see they're about 5/8 of an inch, 1/2 an inch to 5/8 of an inch is the spacing in between the straight vertical lines of stitching. And so the fabric in between it is what shrinks up. So it shrinks in that same dimension, okay? So what I did for these squares is that some of them, I rotated them so that the vertical lines I had stitched are going horizontally. So it just kind of slightly alters the direction of where the texture is and of the stitches because I used a light colored thread on the darker orange fabric and you can see the stitches. So, I mean, there's so many different design elements here that you can play with, okay? Let's see. Oh, Nancy says she used it to make tops of her Christmas stockings last year. How fun, just for like the little cuff part. Super cool, easy way to use it, and you know, you're adding just more texture and a pop of color. But if you do have ugly fabric in your stash, like I say, that you don't love, 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 play around with it, try it with the Stitch and Steam, and you may be surprised once it wrinkles up, you know, what you have here to work with, okay? But I am gonna go ahead, let me just cut this real quick so you can see what happens when you cut it. Grab my rotary cutter, and I have a big ruler here, this is fine. So say I was cutting this, it just stays, okay? Because the Stitch and Steam is directly behind it, okay? So some of you may be wondering, you know, if the stitches that we stitched through the 2 layers, if we cut them and they're not like back stitched, right, at the beginning and end, what's gonna happen? Well, because you've created the fabric and are now, the idea is that you're now going to make something out of it, any new seams that you introduce to the new fabric you've created are gonna hold everything in place, right? So if I sew something here, that perpendicular line of stitching to sew 2 pieces together is gonna go through all this stitching and it's gonna help anchor it all into place. So you don't have to worry about things like unraveling. Just make sure that you backstitch in the project that you're actually using, not so much here. This would be cute to make those little, remember those tiny little notions pouches that I made, like the super teensy little ones? Oh my gosh. A zipper on this and like a little pouch. This one's a little bit too small, but say it like that. With a little zipper right there, super cute. So yeah, after you texturize the fabric, then you'll want to just start again, like if it's a fresh chunk of fabric, and cut it down to the actual size of whatever the pattern or project is that you plan to make. So like you would trim your corners, square things up, and I'm just cutting out a 4.5 inch square here. And it's just new fabric, y'all. Just a fresh new chunk. Imagine a quilt like this. Like say you were just making a baby quilt and just needed something quick but didn't want it to look just like a bunch of 5 inch by 5 inch charm squares sewn together. You can cut some 5 inch squares of textured fabric and just swap them out and introduce them in there. Oh my gosh, that would like level up that baby quilt to a whole nother level, because then there's something tactile, right, for the baby to play with, to touch, and the textured squares in it, or patchwork blocks, will pop. Super fun. Okay. So there's that, there's that. You get the free PDF download if you purchase a Stitch and Steam from us on how to make my texturized placemat. So that's included. And then remember, if we do sell out, or maybe some of you are watching the recording, we are restocking them. So you can just keep ordering on back order. And as soon as we get it in stock, our order, we'll just ship your orders out. Look how fun that looks. And all the stitches that I use here are totally different. So play around with it, experiment, and just have fun with this. It's super, super fun. Okay, let's see. Oh, thank you, Mary. She says, I love these WIP Wednesdays. You're a fantastic teacher. I'm glad. Kay, if you need the PDF for this, just shoot us an email and we'll send it to you. Yeah, for those of you that maybe bought from us years ago or you haven't used it or whatever, if you need the PDF for the placemat, that's no worries. You don't miss out. Just send us an email and we'll email it to you. No big deal. Yeah, Susan says that she's going to try it with a quilt block. Please post pictures. That's going to be so fun. All right. Karen says it would make great fabric for snow on a quilt. Yes. And actually, I'm trying to see if I have it. I don't. But I used to participate in a lot of swaps back in the days, and we would make like little mini art quilts and ship them out. And I actually used this for like a green kind of hilly scene, and I made it like crinkled green and then appliqued it on top of the little background. So think about all the different things that you can do. I mean, anything you want a pop of color or texture, super, super fun. All right, well, great. I'm so glad that some of you have it in your stash and you can take it out and work on some of these projects. For those of you that are just tuning in, I was doing a demo on Bosal Stitch and Steam product. It's a 100% polyester sheet of fabric. It comes in 1/2 yard by 62 inches long, and you basically just place your fabric on top of it. This is the Stitch and Steam. There's no right or wrong side. It doesn't matter. And you put your fabric on top of it. Then you're going to stitch through it. And when you hit it with your steam, it shrinks. So it takes the fabric with it as it puckers and shrinks up. And then you get this really cool textured fabric. So that is what we are demoing here today, or what I just demoed here today. Thank you all for so many different suggestions. Post pictures in the Crafty Gemini Facebook groups if you're in any of them. Once you make something with this, I would love, love, love to see it. Okay? Oh, bye, Julie. Thanks for tuning in with us for your hour break, or your lunch break. I'm glad you tuned in. Okay, awesome. Sue says she just ordered hers. Thank you so much. Again, you can shop with us at craftygemini.com. Please go ahead and also sign up for our email list. You can put them on me now since I'm about to finish off. And we have a free email list, and that is the best way to keep in touch with everything going on Crafty Gemini related. That's where I send out the updates, the links on WIP Wednesday, if we're on, if we're not, what we're selling, new products, new courses, new clubs. I'm working on the next bag club. It's almost done. So you can definitely look out for an email on that. And that is the best way to really keep in touch with everything that we're up to, new stuff that we're carrying in the shop as well. So thank you everybody for tuning in. And I will see y'all next week for another episode of WIP Wednesday. Enjoy your weekend. Grab your Stitch and Steam. And if it's sold out, go ahead and just get it on back order, because we will be refilling those orders as soon as our next big order is in. Thanks everybody. Bye.